Hi everyone, this week we are going to look at Pompeii, and I've given you some primary text to read in this week's folder and another video clip that's on YouTube by the author of one of our books, Mary Beard, which is a really good introduction to Pompeii. What I really want to do in this series of slides is just show you some pictures that I took when I was in Pompeii a few years ago. It's a pretty incredible place. Um, uh, it's incredible, obviously, for a number of reasons, but the first is that you actually get to walk through a Roman town. Um, anyway, so what we're going to do is I'll just show you a series of slides, and you can stop the video at any point and look at the slides closer. And some of the slides I'm not going to say anything, I'll just have you look at them, and then we will move on. And just to place yourself, let me see if I can write on this. So you've got Rome here. And then Naples is down here. And of course, Pompeii was buried under a volcano, Mount Vesuvius, when it erupted and caused quite a devastation in this particular area, including covering up Pompeii and a number of other Roman towns. And then, of course, archaeologists came along and discovered there were towns in there, and then um, still digging these cities out. Okay, so this is a photo I took when I was in Naples a few years ago. And this here is the Bay of Naples. And of course, this is Mount Vesuvius. Now, what you see here, and obviously you can see it's very close to downtown. This was probably the top of the volcano. And this is what blew off when the volcano erupted and buried these towns. Now, we are really fortunate enough to have primary texts or accounts written by Romans very close to this particular period. And what I have here, and you'll probably have to stop the slide because I'm not going to read this to you, is a letter from a man named Pliny the Younger, who was a governor in a province in what's now northern Turkey. He was writing to Tacitus, the famous historian, telling him about Pliny's uncle, who is called Pliny the Elder. And Pliny the Elder just happened to be in around the Bay of Naples and was there with the eruption. He went on a rescue mission and then didn't come back. So it's thought that his ship was probably hit by all this falling debris and then sunk. Anyway, why don't you turn the video off and then read this particular slide. Okay, and then again, the rest of these are just a series of slides when I was in Naples. So what you're looking at is part of the city of Pompeii, and you can see the volcano in the background. You can see how close it is to this particular city. And here's part of the forum or the center of town for Mount Vesuvius, for Pompeii. And of course, you can see Mount Vesuvius or the left of it, the rest of it in the background. Okay, as you walk into this site, if you haven't been there before, they start you off near um, uh, their amphitheater. And this is an outdoor theater, and you've got some people sitting up here so you can see how large this is. And you walk through, let me see if I can get this to write again. For some reason, it's not writing. You end up walking through these tunnels. Now, this whole area under here is essentially hollow. And this is where like the gladiators would wait, the animals would be waiting, and so on. So you don't really get a chance to walk through there, but you do get to see through the bars that they set up. And then here's just a further out shot of the size of this area. And then you walk out, and it's thought that this particular area was some type of a marketplace. You've got some of the colonnades that are here. Some of Pompeii has been recreated. So what happened in the volcanic eruption is that probably 20 to 40 feet of volcanic ash fell on Pompeii and buried it. And that pressure collapsed a lot of the buildings. You've got a neighboring town called Herculaneum, and they didn't get hit with so much of the ash, but they got this volcanic slurry of hot water and mud that ran through the town. And what it ended up doing is propping up a lot of the buildings. So some of what you see is a recreation of what's there. Okay, and then this is part of one of the streets. Now, when I went to Pompeii, this was in 2001, was my first trip. I had read a little about Pompeii and knew of it, but I was not expecting it to be as large as it was. And you can see how, how long this street it goes back. And I'm sort of standing in the middle, and there's a street behind me, obviously, or the street continues. And then there's side streets as well, so you can walk through this pretty amazing city. This is just another view. In the background here, let me see if I can point. You've got these blocks in the street, and those are designed for people to walk over when it was raining. So you've got gutters here, which carries the water away. And then this is the main street with all the buildings on either side. Again, another shot of this. Here's one of the arches, sort of the entryway into the main part of the city. And then you've got a lot of recreated houses in Pompeii. Now this one is not recreated. If you can get a look closer at this, you can see some of the brickwork on some of these buildings. This type of brickwork here is fairly typical for a lot of Roman buildings where the bricks are fairly thin and then long. If you look up here, you can see some rocks that are, or stones that are put together in different ways. There had been a major earthquake in Pompeii years before the volcanic eruption and destroyed a lot of the buildings. And so what they tried to do is figure out how to make buildings earthquake proof, and they tried a number of different methods. Now, this is not what you would normally see when you look at a Roman house. These rocks, what they do is they would plaster over the entire thing and usually paint them. Here we've got my PhD professor, Sam Liu, and one of my PhD examiners, Professor Magella Franzman. Sam is looking into a building, and I'll show you a picture of this in just a second. As you can see, there are these sort of guard ropes, which won't allow you to go into the buildings. Magella is actually looking at graffiti. She was really interested in graffiti, and I've given you a link to some of the graffiti found in Pompeii. This slide also shows you here where you've got sort of the stone, and then here you've got the plaster, where you can see some of the plaster has fallen off. And then you've got these buildings with the waterworks. So some of the houses in Pompeii, especially the wealthy houses, had working sewers, working water pipes that would come in from an aqueduct and have fresh water pumped into the houses. Now, not every house had that. This is sort of leftover of a house. So what you have is this sort of center pool. Now what would have been here is a roof over this. And this roof would have been open here. And so what you would have gotten is rainwater coming in and collecting in this pool. Now you're probably wondering, well, what happens if it rained a lot? Well, these had little drainage holes so that the water would drain under into a tank. And so people could collect rainwater. And then here's just a shot showing some of the pillars with no ceiling, but you can see where the ceiling would have been on these. And then here's a nice shot showing the interior of a wealthy Roman's house. Here's that pool I was showing you. You can't quite see the opening, but you can see the light up here. So again, this is open. And this is fairly typical of a wealthy Roman's house where the front door, you are looking in the front door. And if you look back, it was designed to show you the courtyard. So this particular house has a courtyard that sort of wraps around. And it was meant to sort of dazzle you with the wealth that some of these Romans had with this type of courtyard. And there'd be statues and plants and so on in there. There are quite a few houses with mosaics, which are just little pieces of stone set in concrete or whatever the fixture was. And this is showing a hunting scene. I put this shot in here because what you can see is part of a floor here, and it's missing some of its mosaic. So what's probably going on here is that in the early stages of archaeology, these sort of early archaeologists, we'll just call them instead of pseudo-archaeologists, came in and they lifted up a lot of this material out of this place. And sometimes they didn't do a very good job. A lot of it's in the museum in Naples. If you ever get a chance, definitely go and see the material from Pompeii. This is probably one of the more famous wall paintings in Pompeii. And it's famous for a number of reasons, not only the color, but here you've got a little girl actually reading. So there's a lot of sort of inaccurate material going around about what the Romans did and what, whether little girls went to school or not. They probably didn't go to school, but if they lived in a wealthy family, they probably had a tutor, and somebody certainly taught this little girl to read, and what she's doing is reciting. This is a close-up I took of a band that was painted around an entire room, probably 4 inches tall, but then many feet going around the room. And then I just took a close-up shot showing these little cherubs sitting in a seat and doing their thing. But the whole room had this border painted like this. And then you've got, this is the room that I think it's the one that Sam, my PhD advisor, was looking into. So what you've got is this sort of beautiful, I always call it like Pompeii yellow, Pompeii red. You can see some outside here, which obviously was not part of the original building. When the early archaeologists came in, remember, these buildings were buried. So what they're doing is they're digging through hardened volcanic ash, and they're removing all of that. So sometimes they had to punch through walls. What you're looking at too is they were clearly working on this room where you've got this box here, rectangle, where almost certainly they were going to put a painting in. And then here's a shot showing you where these early archaeologists came in and had to punch through the walls and then excavate all this material. And again, you can see some of the artwork still left on the walls. Here's a hunting scene. So, and you can find some of these paintings still at the site. Again, a lot of them have been removed to the museum. Here's a pretty incredible mosaic floor. Sort of gives you a nice 3D effect. Now they've blocked people from walking on this because you get millions of people walking on this every year. It's just going to wear away. And this shot I took, there's sort of an area right by the forum that's this very long outdoor structure. There's a roof over it, but it's really to the outside or open to the outside. And this clearly is a person. So what you're looking at is not the body itself. What happened when all this ash fell, over time it became hardened, and archaeologists came through and realized what was going on. And so what they did was they would say, and I don't know exactly where it happened on this particular one, but they would punch through, and where the body was actually hollow. And so what they did was they poured plaster into the hole, and it filled up, and then you crack the outside away, and then you get the plaster form. And in this case, it's a person. You can whether they're praying or it's unclear, but they were probably asphyxiated, or choked to death on the volcanic ash. This is a shot of what's referred to as a house of prostitution. So what you can see here are sort of these sexual scenes on either side. And we've got lots of other paintings that came from this particular room. When I was in the museum, they had something called the secret room, which was not open to the public. You had to get permission to go in there to see all of sort of this sexual material. And there's quite a bit of it that came from Pompeii. And it's thought in this particular place, and there were quite a few of them in Pompeii and the surrounding area, it's thought that you would go up and find the picture of what you wanted to do, and then you'd pay the woman who was there, and then you'd do your thing. As you walk along the street, so in this shot, the street is right behind here, you have these cafes. So what you could do is either stand at the window and order, or you could come in and order. And what you've got here are a couple of large containers. I'll show you one below, but just behind this is a large vessel. And then you've got shelves here for food and so on. So you have these cafes. And this is another one where you would be sitting here. You could look at the artwork here. Someone would be serving you here. And then probably bowls of condiments of whatever it would be here that you could choose from. Here's a kitchen, and I always like to think this is some of the early pizza from Rome. I don't know if they were actually cooking pizza, but certainly bread, where you've got the oven here. This is a grinding stone, so they were grinding their own flour, collecting the material here, and then using it to put into the oven. As you get closer to the end of the site, and this is the second to the last slide, you have a building which I think is called the Treasury, and you can see some of the second story still remaining on this. There are pillars here which you can't see. If you move back, you can actually see them. So most of this was all covered as well. And then as you're leaving the site of Pompeii, you walk down this path that goes downwards, and you can see sort of back into the site itself. Again, this site is pretty incredible. They are still doing active work in Pompeii, still excavating streets and buildings. So if you're interested in archaeology, there is still a lot of work that can be done on this particular site.